Alert came through at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. I was still half asleep, reaching for my phone to turn off the alarm, when I saw the notification sitting there from my grandmother's estate account. A wire transfer. $340,000. Outgoing. I sat up so fast, I knocked my water bottle off the nightstand. My name is Lena. And that account. The one my grandfather set up before he passed. The one my grandmother restructured into a trust before she got sick. Had my name on it as the sole beneficiary of the condo. Not my sister's name. Mine. So why was $340,000 leaving it? I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without the condo itself. My grandparents bought it in 1987, when the neighborhood was still considered a stretch. 6th floor, 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows facing east. By the time I was old enough to notice things like light and architecture, that condo had become the kind of place people don't talk about casually. Not because it was flashy. It wasn't. It was the opposite of flashy. It was just solid. Real. The kind of solid that comes from 30 years of paid-off mortgage and a building that was constructed when buildings were still built to last. My grandmother called it the apartment on Hadley. Nobody in our family ever called it anything else. Growing up, I spent school breaks there. I learned to make coffee in that kitchen. I did homework at the table by the window where my grandfather used to do his crosswords. After he passed, it was just my grandmother and me most weekends, watching old movies she'd seen 15 times and acting like we hadn't both seen them 15 times too. When she was diagnosed. Early stage dementia. Then not so early. She sat me down at that same kitchen table and told me she'd already talked to a lawyer. She'd updated the trust. The apartment on Hadley would go to me when she died. She wanted me to have it because she knew I'd keep it in the family. She knew my sister wouldn't. She didn't say that last part out loud. She didn't have to. My sister's name is Vivienne. She's 4 years older than me, and she has always operated under the assumption that wanting something badly enough is the same as deserving it. The estate attorney, a woman named Carol who wore the same gray blazer every time I saw her, walked me through everything after my grandmother's death. The trust documents, the beneficiary designation, the letter my grandmother had written and had notarized, explaining her reasoning. Carol made it very clear the condo was mine. The only thing I needed to do was file the deed transfer, which would take a few weeks, and in the meantime, the estate account would hold the corresponding assets. I nodded. I took the folder she gave me. I thanked her and drove home thinking about which of my grandmother's things I wanted to keep and which I should donate. I should have filed that deed transfer the same afternoon. I didn't, because I thought I had time. Because the documents were clear. Because I trusted that clarity would be enough. It wasn't. What I found out later, much later, piece by piece, in a way that felt like being handed broken glass in the dark, was this. While the estate was still in the process of transferring, Vivienne went to the building management office. She told them she was handling the estate. She had a copy of an old power of attorney, one our grandmother had signed 3 years earlier, during a hospital stay, when she needed someone to manage her bills temporarily. That POA had technically expired, but Vivienne had it. And the property management company apparently did not look closely enough. She also contacted a real estate agent, a friend of hers, someone she'd known for years. And that agent listed the apartment on Hadley without running the title properly. Without confirming that the POA was still valid, without checking the trust documents that would have shown my name clearly. They found a buyer in 11 days. 11 days. The buyer was a young couple. I want to be very precise here, because it matters. They were not bad people. They were excited. They were probably thrilled to find a place like that for the price Vivienne listed it at, and she did list it under market. Which I think she did deliberately, to move it fast before anyone could look too closely. $340,000. Gone. In 11 days. For a condo that would have sold for $420,000 or more if anyone had bothered to wait. And I didn't know any of it until that notification hit my phone at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning. I called Vivienne before I even got out of bed. She picked up on the third ring. I could hear traffic in the background. She was already out somewhere, already moving, already living her life with $340,000 of mine in it. Did you sell the condo? I asked. She was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. I was going to call you, she said. Did you sell the condo? Lena, I needed the money. I have been trying to keep the business afloat for 8 months, and you know that. You know that. The building was just sitting there and… It wasn't sitting there. It wasn't sitting there. It was mine. The trust is complicated and you hadn't done anything with the deed yet, and I had a legal power of attorney. That expired, Vivian. 3 years ago. Another pause. Shorter this time. I think you're misremembering the dates, she said. I hung up. I'm not going to pretend I handled the next hour well. I sat on the edge of my bed, and I did not move for a very long time. I kept thinking about the kitchen table, the crosswords, the way the morning light came in through those east-facing windows and made the whole place feel like something worth protecting. Vivian didn't sell it because she needed a place to live. She didn't sell it because she loved it and thought someone else should. She sold it to inject cash into a boutique she'd opened 2 years ago that sold overpriced candles and linen clothing and had been hemorrhaging money since month 4. She sold my grandmother's apartment, the one my grandmother specifically and legally left to me, to buy herself more time on a business that was already failing. I found that out from my cousin, who found out from Vivian's business partner, who apparently had no idea where the sudden cash infusion had come from. Vivian used $280,000 of it in the first 6 weeks. My friend Danny is a paralegal. She's the kind of person who stays calm in emergencies the way some people are just wired to, not because she doesn't understand the stakes, but because she processes faster. I called her after I got off the phone with Vivian and before I'd fully decided what I was going to do. She listened to everything without interrupting once. Then she said, "Okay, you need a real estate attorney." Not Carol, she handled the estate, but you need someone who does property disputes, and you need to move today. Today? The buyers may already have started the transfer. Once they've taken possession and done any work on the property, it gets messier. Today, Lena. I had an appointment by noon. The attorney I found was named Mr. Okafor. He had an office on the 14th floor of a building downtown, and he had the kind of presence that made you feel like the problem was already half solved just by being in his office. He looked at the trust documents for maybe 7 minutes. He looked at the copy of the PO Vivian had used for another 3. Then he looked at me. "This power of attorney lapsed in March 2 years ago," he said. "Your sister used it to execute a real estate transaction 14 months after expiration." I know. The agent who listed this property had a legal obligation to verify the authority of the seller. She didn't. I know. The title company that processed the closing. He paused, reading something on his screen. Also missed it. That's not unusual. Title companies miss things. They carry errors and omissions insurance for exactly this reason. He leaned back. None of that changes what happened. The sale was executed using fraudulent authority, which means the transaction is voidable. Can I get the condo back? He was quiet for a moment. The buyers are innocent third parties. That complicates things. But your claim takes priority over theirs when fraud is involved. The question becomes whether the courts unwind the sale entirely, returning the property to you and compensating the buyers through the parties who committed the fraud, or whether you're made whole through financial compensation. I don't want financial compensation, I said. I want the apartment on Hadley. He wrote something down. I understand, he said. Let's start with a demand letter. The letter went out 11 days after I sat up in bed with my heart pounding at 6:47 a.m. Vivian received it at her home address. Her business partner received a courtesy copy. The real estate agent received a separate letter from Mr. Okafor's office that dealt specifically with her license and her liability. The letter gave Vivian and all relevant parties 72 hours to respond with a plan for making me whole. Either the return of the property or the full fair market value plus damages. I know what you're thinking. I thought it too. 72 hours sounds dramatic. It is, a little. But it also sets a legal clock. It creates a record. It tells everyone involved that this is not a family argument. It's a property dispute with documentation and an attorney and a clear timeline. Vivienne did not call me, she called our mother. My mother is a person who has always believed that conflict is more dangerous than injustice. She's not a bad person. She loves both of us. But she has spent her whole life smoothing things over before they can become real. And the smoothing over has always cost whoever was willing to absorb the loss. That was usually me. She called me the morning after the letter went out. Lena, I think you need to consider what this will do to your relationship with your sister. My sister sold my apartment. She made a mistake. She used an expired legal document to sell a property that was in my name to fund a failing business. That's not a mistake, Mom. A mistake is forgetting to call on someone's birthday. She's under so much pressure. I know she's under pressure. I watched her open that store. I helped her move furniture in. I was there. And I'm telling you right now that none of that is my responsibility to absorb at the cost of losing the one thing Grandma left me. My mother went quiet. She wanted me to have that apartment, I said. My voice had gone flat in the way it does when I'm trying very hard not to fall apart. She sat me down at that kitchen table and she told me she had it notarized, she did everything right. And Vivienne took it anyway and she did it while I was grieving, and I need you to not ask me to make that okay. I heard my mother crying on the other end of the line. I said I loved her. I said goodbye. I sat in my car in a parking lot for a while. Then I drove home. Here is something I didn't expect. The buyers, the young couple, reached out to Mr. Okafor's office on day 2 of the 72-hour window. Not to fight. Not through a lawyer. The wife called directly. She said they had done some research after receiving notice that the title was being disputed. She said they understood they had purchased in good faith, but that they had discovered the circumstances and wanted to talk. Mr. Okafor told me about the call and asked how I wanted to proceed. I said I wanted to talk to them. We met at a coffee shop near the building, near my grandmother's building, on a Thursday afternoon. They were younger than I expected. They had a folder with them, the same way I always show up to hard conversations with a folder. The husband said, "We would not have bought this property if we had known, and we're not going to fight for it knowing what we know now." The wife said, "We've contacted our own attorney. We're going after the agent and the title company for our losses. That's not your problem." I didn't cry in front of them. I wanted to. They had not yet moved in. They had not done any work to the unit. Their closing had been delayed by some paperwork issue on their end, which meant, by some form of grace I still can't fully account for, the apartment on Hadley was still physically intact. The legal process took 4 months. I'm not going to romanticize that part. It was slow and expensive, and there were 2 separate points at which Mr. Okafor had to explain to me why something I thought was simple was, in fact, not simple. There were filings and hearings and a mediation session where Vivienne sat across a table from me and looked at the middle distance for 3 hours and said as little as legally possible. At the end of it, the sale was voided. The court found that the expired POA did not confer valid selling authority and that the transaction was executed fraudulently. The buyers were compensated by the title company's errors and emissions insurance, and separately received a judgment against the listing agent, who lost her license 6 weeks later. Vivienne was ordered to repay the estate the full $340,000 plus legal costs. She could not. She filed for bankruptcy 4 months after that. I have the condo. I am writing this from the kitchen table by the east-facing windows. The light in the morning still does what it always did. I brought my grandmother's coffee maker, the one she'd had since the 90s. The kind you're not supposed to be able to find replacement carafes face for anymore. I found a replacement carafe on eBay for $11. Some things you can get back. Some things you just refuse to let go. I don't talk to Vivienne anymore. I want to be honest about what that costs because I think people sometimes hear I cut off my sister and imagine it as clean. It isn't. There are family dinners that are navigated around the subject. There are holidays that have new logistics now. My mother is still grieving the version of us she wanted us to be. I understand that. I don't stop understanding it just because I also understand that I cannot let someone take something from me and then smile across a table at them every Thanksgiving as though nothing happened. My grandmother knew who Vivienne was. She wrote that letter. She had it notarized. She did everything she could think of to protect me because she knew that love alone wasn't protection enough. I think about that a lot. The things people do for you when they know they're running out of time to do them. The apartment on Hadley is mine. I keep the blue folder of trust documents in the kitchen drawer, right next to where she used to keep the crossword puzzles. Not because I need it anymore, because I want to remember that the paperwork mattered, that doing things right matters, even when it doesn't feel like it will. It matters. It did. I've thought a lot about what made Vivienne think she could do what she did. Not in an angry way, or not only in an angry way, but in the way you think about something when you're trying to actually understand it. Because understanding it feels like the only thing that keeps it from just being a wound you carry forever. And I think what I keep coming back to is this. She thought the wanting was the same as the deserving. She always had. She looked at that condo and she saw a resource that wasn't being used fast enough, and she made a decision that I would absorb the loss because I had always absorbed things. That was the calculation. Not malice exactly, just a lifetime of getting away with it. What she didn't calculate was that I would stop absorbing. There's something nobody tells you about being the one who keeps the peace. At some point, keeping the peace stops being generosity and starts being complicity. I kept the peace for years. I smoothed things over. I let things go that I should have held. And I don't say that to blame myself for what Vivienne did. She made her own choices, and they were wrong, and no amount of my past accommodation made them anything other than wrong. But I understand now that every time I let something go, I was teaching her what I would tolerate. And I had taught her without meaning to, that the answer was almost anything. The condo changed that. Or rather, my grandmother changed that. She sat at that kitchen table and she did everything right. She was meticulous and deliberate, and she made sure I was protected. She couldn't have known Vivienne would find a gap in the timing and move through it. But she did everything a person can do, and I decided her effort deserved to be honored. Not just emotionally. Legally. Completely. That decision, to call Danny, to find Mr. Okafor, to walk into that office with my folder and refuse to be told it was too complicated. That was the thing that changed the outcome. Not luck. Not the buyers being decent people though they were. And that mattered. The thing that changed the outcome was the decision, made when I was still shaking and sitting on the edge of my bed, that I was not going to let this be absorbed. Actions have weight. The ones Vivienne took. The expired document, the underpriced listing, the 11-day rush, they had a specific gravity, and that gravity eventually pulled everything down. She lost the money. She lost the business. She lost, I think, some version of herself she'd been maintaining for a long time. That's not something I celebrate, but I notice it. And what I built? The documentation, the legal process, the willingness to sit across a table from my own sister in a mediation room for 3 hours and not flinch, that had weight too. That's what I mean when I say actions have consequences. It cuts both directions. The things you refuse to do also shape what's possible. Vivienne refused to do things the honest way. I refused to let dishonesty win. Both refusals had outcomes. I still have the condo. I still make coffee in that kitchen in the morning. The light still comes through those east-facing windows the way it always did. Some things, it turns out, are worth the fight. The trick is knowing which ones before it's too late to fight for them.